has all of the power that it needs to get at the information. And Tom Fitton, speaking earlier, uh, Judicial Watch, Tom, what you guys have done and continue to do. Tom's been at it longer than I've been in Congress, is just a few years, and he's absolutely right. We understand the stonewalling that goes on, and in lots of ways, the executive branch is almost impenetrable. It's one of those things that's you really don't you see it from outside as an interested observer, but get into Congress and start seeing it firsthand. It really is amazing. So we've got our work cut out for us. Um, I've been working closely with Jim Jordan on the Judiciary Committee before all this has come to pass. But when the idea of the idea of having just like was done in 1975 when Senator Frank Church was leading the Select Committee in the Senate and really made headway, but they faced the same issues then, the stonewalling, and they worked through them. They uncovered a lot of information. My own view is that the security state and the degree that's abusing Americans' rights has metastasized, has gotten much worse since then. So I'm really thrilled that that's a part of this agreement. I don't mean to suggest it's the most important part of the agreement, because it is a far-reaching agreement, and I'm really pleased with that. That is the outcome, and so we've now resolved the speaker's race, and we can get down to business.
Representative, so we, just so you know, we have close over 4,500 people in the room right now. And we just thank everybody for being in the room. We have Representative Dan Bishop with us. We just had Representative Lauren Boebert and Representative Matt Gaetz. And we do have Matt Gaetz' communication director, Joel Valdez, who's here. And make sure you do give him a follow, the real Joel Valdez as well. And so, Representative, we have seen over basically since 26 since the presidency 2017
Looks like Gaetz and Boebert were already on. I missed them.
Significant abuses, in my opinion, of not just the FISA process, but some basic law, by bureaucrats who are totally unelected. We have the top levels of the FBI with spouses getting paid by political PACs. We have DNC law firms being housed in the same building with FBI folks. So what going with the Judiciary Committee coming up? What's the discussions you guys are having right now about bringing some of those people in, holding them accountable so that America can see our laws actually matter?
And Chris, before I even respond to that, I think the way you introduced the topic is absolutely right, and all of us have sort of become aware of it. Whatever point in time we began picking up, and that became an interest to really follow. But you could even go back a good bit before that. The place that always strikes my mind as the first place is that from the Obama administration, at least in 2010, 2011, all the way up through 2016, there were tens of thousands of searches by FBI contractors on NSA databases of Americans' private communication, and that are stored, collected by NSA and stored. And to this day, I don't think it's ever come out who the contractors were who made those searches.
Right.
That was what was revealed in that then Mike Rogers, different Mike Rogers than the Alabama congressman, but Mike Rogers, who was running Admiral, who was running NSA, it sort of was uncovered that these searches had been just grossly abused, and they at that point in time, 2016, cut off access to NSA databases to FBI contractors. But if you take just that one, no one's ever been held to account for that, even if that was a fix, which I have some doubts about. But so that goes before everything you've described, and it is the meta intel state is everywhere, and we see the abuses that crop up more and more and more. I don't see the agencies responding to that to see to it that um, you know new policies are established. I don't think they followed the policies they have. So the inspector general at the FBI had that report about the gross abuse of just disregard of what they call the Woods file requirement in FISA warrant applications. And so I mean, I just think it is a horrendous problem. I've sort of lost your question specifically just in trying to defining the scope of it.
Absolutely.
Repeat the question.
Well, and representative, everything you just said is so spot on because I just stopped at 2016. We can go all the way back to the Obama era, 2010, 2011,
And
spying
probably
on
earlier,
journalists,
right?
spying on journalists, the whole, spying
Yep.
on members
Yep.
of Congress, spying on senators. But the whole
Mhm.
point of my question is there discussions? What can you kind
What's
of
the
give us some
plan, I guess,
insight
is what you're
on
saying, right?
bringing them in, putting them
Yeah.
under oath, and holding them accountable
Well,
so that we know our laws are going to be defended?
and yes, sir. And it reminds me why I was saying that the expansiveness of the problem, and it continues, I think, even today. I can think of another 10 examples we could talk about. So I think the task, and I was talking with Jim Jordan on the telephone earlier today. I think there's an organizational task which is massive. Jim's Judiciary Committee staff has been making considerable preparation to engage in this process. There were um, uh, preservation letters, so forth, sent out before, uh, before this Congress convened. Of course, you've seen the late dance with Biden administration saying you got to uh, renew your request. You got to make your request because the request you made when you made them, you didn't have authority to get the information is because you're in the minority. Therefore, you got to start over, which is just an absurdity. But so it's a big task. It's going to have a lot of organizational requirements. There's going to be need to staff up. One of the things that we made a specific point of agreement and what we worked out with leadership is that this in this church style committee, this committee on the weaponization of the federal government will be fairly significant. Well, will be significantly resourced. I'm going to leave. Essentially, it's got to have the same sort of resources available to it as were provided to the J6 committee. So there's going to be a staffing up process and getting after it. But there'll be subpoenas that are going out. I think they've got. I won't characterize the number because I'll misstate it, but many subpoenas ready to roll. Now, as Tom was saying, it's a dance, and so that getting the subpoenas out is a first step, but we can get out in the private sector for information. Another commenter here talked about the fact that the very salient fact that Twitter, now owned by Elon Musk, he seems to be devoted to the principle that that sunlight is a great thing to have, and so I think there are opportunities like that. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. We have opportunities to cooperate with the private sector and make sure we get all the information available. So we have a fairly big organizational task, but I can tell you this: as I make my final plans for what I'm going to be spending time doing in this Congress, this is my task. I will be on the Judiciary Committee. I anticipate
Listen to this
being
guy
on
here, Dan Bishop.
the Committee on Weaponization of the Federal
If you're
Government.
tuning in
The subcommittee is
just
actually
now,
a select subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee.
Monica and Air chose to hold
And
spaces
I may have another
inviting
assignment,
various
but this is where I'm
representatives
going to
to
spend basically
discuss
all
the
my
recent
time.
vote.
Excellent. Thank you, Congressman. Tom, you have a question. You have a comment.
Well, thank you, Congressman Bishop. We really appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to assisting, the Congress wherever we can. I recall back in the day working with Nancy Pelosi on internal ethics issues on the Hill. So, I just wish there were just more bipartisanship in holding government accountable. There's plenty of it's hard to find on the other side. And I would just encourage you to kind of consider this to be like a 2-minute drill because there's so little time to get this done. And we've got this kind of urgency related to the continued censorship of Americans right now that that's happening with the help of the federal government. Maybe legislation to prohibit communications except in the most extreme circumstances about removing content by any federal official.
Yeah,
And then and then of course there are all these gimmies back that that I shouldn't say gimmies because they've never been achieved, but we've had issues about funding Planned Parenthood and kind of funding the left that I think ought to be a priority. But I think the way to approach these investigations generally is to consider them to be all part of. You're in the penalty phase. You kind of generally know the crimes have been committed. and you want to put a little bit of sinew around it so that you understand and have enough to move forward to the penalty phase, and the penalty, contingent on the nature of what you're investigating. Because the danger is that we'll have 2 years of investigation and not much to show about it in the end, other than a bunch of document fights and arguments about what the documents mean. I'd rather have the fights about what is it you're going to do, given all the information we've had in the last several years about the government abuses, because we don't need many more documents to bring the hammer down.
I concur with that, Tom. I think one point you make reference to, there's this insidious practice that's grown up that it has a term, jawbone. So, it's been a long time. You've seen that members
Jawboning.
of Congress or the president will sort of talk about an issue out into the public space where they want to sort of affect private behavior. Whether or not that's a legitimate practice when it's done by an elected official, at least the elected official can be unelected. But what we've seen in this Twitter stuff is sort of this regimented, sounds like it's antiseptic and very professionalized uh, use of people deep in the FBI bureaucracy to have they call it engaging with their community partners, and they'll throw this all this vague BS, but they're really talking about manipulating the flow of information in public and and in the public square, and and then, as you know, when when the Twitter files were coming out, whatever tranche of those, and the FBI's remarkable statement that I mean, it's just unbelievable that in its contemptuousness, but said, that notwithstanding conspiracy theorists, that they're simply engaging with their community partners. And I don't remember precisely what the rest of it was. It was BS. But you're right, Tom. There's plenty of evidence of the abuses. I think our task is to organize that and make it, even as we're uncovering more of it. I think there'll be with it. So these things have to happen on multiple tracks at the same time. I believe, based on what my conversation was with the representative from Ohio, Chairman, that we may have the first hearing in this committee before the end of February. So and of course, as you know, Tom, there'll be processes of having witness interviews in out of the public view, under oath, and that can move things along quickly. So we're going to be talking to people from the beginning. We're not waiting on documents to talk to people. We're not going to be waiting on completing those interviews to have hearings. We're going to proceed with all of it in the same path.
Hello, Representative Dan Bishop. I had a question for you. I saw that you have done some work on TSA and Patriot Act related bills. I was wondering, do you see a future where we maybe do away with the lines and the scanning, that we might actually be in a position where we can have our civil liberties within our country again?
Oh boy.
What are
You
your
mean
thoughts?
you're talking about just at lines at airports or scanners being scanned at
Yeah, the
airports
scan.
to
Just like we used to back in the 90s and the 80s, like we used to go to the airport, maybe there was a metal detector, but for the most part, we have like robust national security. So we don't need to worry about our internal, between our airports.
He's like,
Do
fool.
you think do you think that's possible?
I don't know that anybody's ever put it to me quite that way, and even though I find it to be a great nuisance, I don't know. I haven't really believed that would be responsible to meaningfully dispense with the security protocols at airports. I worry about how they operate. Maybe you could tell me something that you think makes that reasonable. But you say we have we got enough internal security. That's not that we don't need to be concerned about that. One thing that troubles me, and the bureaucracy's answer troubles me more. Our southern border is so open that they have hundreds of thousands of people crossing. They don't have no ability to track
I
or know
can't
who
find
they
who's
are at
asking
all.
that question
Come
here.
from people all over the world. 20 hijackers created 9/11. Now, I maybe I don't know where I'd go wrong with your in terms of what you think. I'd love to hear what you think. But are you saying you believe that sort of TSA security screening at airports is largely unnecessary, and you don't believe we face a material risk there?
That's exactly what I'm saying, based on a few research reports that I've read on that topic, and I'm kind of looking at if we could reorient to screen our visas and other foreign national security so that we can create a secure environment for the airports from state to state domestic travel, so that we
Yeah.
wouldn't have to do that. But we still might have to do that for international flights. That's completely reasonable. It just as it always has been when we're doing customs and inspections. So
Do you think
that's
there's any
yeah.
interior security risk by virtue of the fact that our southern border is completely open?
Okay,
I
that's
think, yeah, go
kind of
ahead.
like a bad argument.
Yeah,
Chris, go ahead.
Representative, while we're on the topic, real quick, I don't want to jump off the topic of the Patriot Act, because I think it's
Yeah.
super important given the Twitter files
Yep.
release and what we've been seeing, of course, with the illegal spying on the sitting president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, in the White House through NSA contractors, and as you
Yep.
mentioned, all these years under Obama and whatnot. So let me ask you: is there discussions happening with this new majority about a digital bill of rights, like an online bill of rights for Americans that will protect their
Important
identity,
question.
their data, and prevent these political targeting and censorship and all these things with big tech?
Yeah. So I would say at this point, Chris, it hadn't become a point of focus for me as we begin this Congress, because I've had my hands very full as we were discussing. But I know that there are, I can name you people in Congress who are particularly focused on that issue. The gentleman named Warren Davidson, also from Ohio, a good friend and a great conservative, and he has a notion about, and there have been many others about uh, establishing uh, in law, or undertaking something that the law didn't previously need to define, but it should be done now. That individual information about an individual is a proprietary interest of the individual. It should be recognized that way. We ought to take appropriate action to cause the law to do that. And Warren's idea is that, and this gets a little bit above my head pretty quickly, but that you could use tokenization or blockchain technology in order to compartmentalize that information and create an accountability system so that it can't be used without the permission of, or if it's compensation of individuals. I think that's a little bit along
Oh,
the
you
lines
know
of
what
what
this
you're
relates to?
asking me.
Something
I
that
think that's a
that
great.
character, first name Austin,
It's a
said
novel
in
to
his
me
recent
and
video.
important issue to deal with. It obviously would turn today's digital world sort of topsy turvy, in which massive enterprises have been created on the economic strength of compiling the data of hundreds of millions of Americans and billions of people around the world. So don't know precisely what the policy answer is to it, but you're asking. I mean, Chris, I think that question is being asked. There are members who are interested in it, and whether it'll advance or not. I think it's sort of like the process we've been through the last week, which is we have had concerns that priorities were not being really set in a way that we knew what legislative policy strategy was going to be. We've gone to the mat for a number of those. I wouldn't say that one's on the list of the things we've already spent a very hard week and 6 months negotiating and bringing to fruition. But now's the time to add to the list, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And Representative, I appreciate you answering that, because I think it's a super important one, especially with these folks violating some constitutional inalienable rights, to prevent government from illegally monitoring us as Americans with no warrant, no reason. So I do want to go to a couple of hands here, but I'm going to start with Michael. Michael, go ahead.
So I have one question for Representative Bishop or Gates or Boebert if they come back. So, and then Tom, I do have a suggestion for you related to nonprofit and mental
I guess
health.
they came at the very beginning.
Something you
in the
could
first hour.
relate for first responder, or investigate for first responder
Hope they
mental
come
health.
back.
So as far as the Congress goes, so I'm a DoD employee. Sometimes I have to write contracts for things. That means that I entertain DoD contractors who want to fulfill those contracts. And my job, I train security cooperation planners on how to build plans to work with foreign countries. And the national security strategy states flat out that China is the number one threat. And then also, competition. Competition's a big thing. So I'm helping guys build plans, doing foreign security force assessments, developing capabilities of foreign forces. And then I turn around and you can literally Google where people are coming into Congress and they made 70,000, they get a salary of X and they leave multimillionaires and their investments are literally into China, which is counterproductive to those of us who understand that they're
that's what's
literally
happening.
impeding competition. So when will Congress put restrictions on investments into threats indicated in the national security strategy? That's a question for you, Mr. Bishop. And then for Tom, I would recommend that you look into NGO monies coming out of the American Rescue Plan. I had 4 different police forces in the state of Virginia who tried to get TRIP training from me. And as the money filtered down that was allocated for first responder mental health, it literally went out to different organizations and to other places. And the actual police officers, the agencies, could not apply for funds to get mental health training. That to me, so that's just another way that they're basically pushing an agenda by how they disperse the money that are going to these other NGOs.
Right.
So,
Right.
Mr. Bishop, could you go first?
Yeah, Michael, I'd be glad to address the question. I think you tied together a couple of different things, and I was trying to track it all. Certainly we see a lot of people go to Congress, spend decades and decades there, and become and then they emerge multimillionaires. You think about, but it usually seems to me like a Joe Biden, Hunter Biden kind of symbiosis, or Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi, where member of Congress earns $174,000, which is really a nice salary, but it doesn't let you accumulate wealth of that kind, and certainly maintaining 2 households and the like. So, and there are all sorts of rumors go around about massive benefit programs or something available to members. It's really awful. You don't get any. So, however that's happening, who knows? The questions have arisen, like you said. The thing that I hear you're saying, how should Congress regulate the ability to invest in threats? I think you were specifically talking about whether they could get rich maybe by investing in maybe Chinese business or something like that. Some have talked about saying that you should ban members from owning stocks. I was a lawyer for 30 years, and we were frugal and saved money we got retirement. And I have used mutual funds. Congress is not an attractive thing economically for me. I don't have anybody I'm in symbiosis with, and I'm going to go enrich through some treachery. But then the question would be, should I also say if somebody's maybe cutting their salary by half or 2/3 or something like that to go to Congress, you also want to say they can't own a stock? I've been reticent to come to that conclusion. Maybe. I mean, you're already required to file every transaction in stocks you make so people know what they are. I think it's, I've got to, it's the problem's got to be dealt with, but you better get it right. Congress usually does more harm than good in my estimation when they go regulate. So if you have a precise, you can aim that shot, that rifle shot at an obvious and comprehensive fix, great. Do you want to make it so nobody who's got anything or accumulated anything in their lives would ever think about going to Congress? I don't know. You'd have to tell me that answer. I do.
Sir, yes, sir.
People, yeah,
I would tell you, for me, as someone who literally has to help component commands build these plans on behalf of geographic combatant commands, I would tell you that when members of Congress are investing and making millions off of the number 1 threat or the number 2 threat that's in the national security strategy and in the national defense strategy, that's just flat out disheartening.
Sure. I hear that. Are you saying
that's a rifle shot? That's a rifle shot.
Yeah, just make sure I get to understand. You say they're investing in a threat. Are you saying what your proposal is that no member of Congress would be able to invest in any kind of a stock or a business that is in any country that's hostile to the United States? Is that the point, or is that what you were saying?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I can't, I mean, I've never had any such investment. I can't imagine having one. So I don't even know what, I mean, again, I don't think the Hunter
Sounds
Biden
nervous.
Burisma board membership or his hedge fund or whatever funded out of China, I, I would be glad to outlaw all of that. If
Okay.
that's the
Awesome.
answer. I mean,
Yeah.
if you did it for members of Congress, in other words,
Yeah, that's
but
great.
I don't know who's got them. So somebody would have to, but it's worth looking into. And it would be maybe a foreign affairs or task responsibility. Somebody would dig into
Not
that.
sure if
I'm
he's
not on either of
panicking
these
or
committees.
just a little
Somebody probably would
nervous
speak to
or
that with greater expertise than me.
clueless.
Probably have insufficient expertise on it.
Michael, do you have
Thanks, sir.
Michael, do you have anything?
This is Tom. The challenge is, depending on the country, there's quote no really private investment, especially for a member of Congress or a high level government official or their immediate families. I mean, if a member of Congress's family or the son or daughter of a member of the administration or any administration wants to invest in China, they'll be able to invest in China with special help by the Chinese government. I mean, it's that naked. Same goes for Russia. And the problem for Biden is that was happening in more than one country: China, Russia, Ukraine, all part of a piece. And it was all part of an influence operation that was, in my view, just the ultimate in racketeering. And in terms of the mental health issue, I don't think the federal government's capable of running a program to help first responders, typically at the local level or state level, deal with mental health issues. So it's no surprise, the money goes to inflate budgets of local agencies or nonprofits. I mean, that's the feature of the program. They can say whatever they want as to what the goal is. The goal is to increase the size of a government and their allies on the outside. Congressman Bishop, just quickly, one of the concerns I've had is the internal operations of the House in terms of the ethics and the abuses. Has been talking about removing Schiff from the Intelligence Committee. And I know this is probably a bridge too far, but this is the way I think I would think about it. All members of the January 6th committee should be barred from committees in the next Congress. All members who voted to obtain and release President Trump's tax returns, an absolute violation of the public trust. And abuse of the IRS for political purposes should also similarly be barred. And that's kind of the approach I would take in terms of thinking about how to deal with what the abuses were in the prior Congress. And when it comes to hearings, I would think of a reason to get an immediate hearing going on. And maybe the first hearing is kind of like a formalized spaces like we're talking about here, a hearing about the hearings. What is it Congress ought to be talking about? What are the issues that experts on the outside and the inside are seriously concerned about that demand oversight and accountability? And, just kind of provide background to the public and allow the public to share and feel they're being heard on these corruption issues that much of the establishment doesn't want to deal with.
Tom, that's a very interesting idea, and I think it's a pretty good one, and sort of fertilizes the brain for going in as we're doing the planning process. One of the things that it triggers me to respond with is that I know, frankly, Kevin McCarthy has said this, but Jordan has talked about it in the specific sphere. I don't think we're going to do our hearings all in Washington. I think we're going to get out in the country and go to places where things have happened. But I think that might facilitate what you're describing in terms of taking it out and let people be heard and sort of get and maybe build the menu of things we need to look into in public is what you're describing. I think that's got some merit to it.
And you can do that. You can do that you could do that in a week in terms of, I exaggerate for effect, but listeners should understand congressional hearings take a lot of time to develop. Too much time, probably unnecessarily so.
Yeah.
But the toward hearings I'm talking about, you bring in folks who are trusted, who know what they're talking about. You could probably get a good discussion, and and the left can participate as well, obviously.
Right. And Tom, as we've been preparing, you've been following developments in Washington. I know because I've watched your communications on it. I'm sure you've seen some of mine.
Yeah.
You and I probably need to talk and do a little bit of. We're sort of moving to we can pivot to getting it done now that we've gotten the charter laid for having the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, really quick, before I move Michael down, Michael has an awesome nonprofit, Representative Bishop, that I really want you to know about, and maybe, and by the way, our host Monica sits on the board of it, and so I want him to just let all 5,000 people in this room know where they can go to support that nonprofit that helps veterans and members of law enforcement. And I'd love, Representative Bishop, if we could potentially get you guys and other members to get with Monica and Michael and maybe have a meeting and learn a little bit more about it, because I think it's doing some tremendous things. Michael, where can they find your nonprofit?
So the nonprofit is Liberty Organization for Veterans and Emergency Responders. We are at libertyove.com, libertyove.com. And what we're doing is we're mainly instituting a PTS protocol for veterans, family members, first responders, and their family members that is literally separating emotion from trauma in the brain, and it's resolving their PTSD issues. We're trying to run a 5-year study on that. Additionally, part of our sort of funding to make that happen business model is to sell those trainings at a very reduced cost to police agencies, fire agencies, EMS agencies, in order to train 20 of their individuals in about 2 to 3 days in order to execute that on peer-to-peer support. And there's a side benefit that we get no benefit from, which is we do not care if they use it on a member of society once they have it. We just need the data back from them on those they do peer-to-peer support on, so that eventually we can move this into mainstream psychological medicine.
Thank you so much, Michael. We appreciate you coming up. I'm going to move you down, and I'm going to bring up Representative Bishop, a journalist from the Daily Wire, Bree Dale, who's phenomenal. I want to bring her up here. So, Michael, I'm going to move you down, and we're going to bring up Bree, if I can, if it's going to let me. And she's going to come up here in just a second here. But while she's coming up, I want to take a moment real quick, to just let folks know. Obviously, we're in a recession. We're heading hard into potentially a really bad one. I'm hoping for a miracle that doesn't happen. But I do want to take a moment to just let folks know that if you're not comfortable putting all your eggs in one basket in the stock market, I mean, we are having this conversation about, members of Congress trading stocks, whatnot. But if you are not comfortable having all your eggs in one basket, Monica, one of her sponsors is Goldco. And, I encourage everyone to go to monicaprotectswithgold.com and just inquire. And, there's no obligation there. This is not financial advice, by the way, but I'm just saying you can look at gold, silver, other metals, and put a little bit away to where it's not all in one basket. So monicaprotectswithgold.com. Monica, that Goldco is awesome, correct?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for reminding me, guys. I'm getting DMs about it. Yes, I do. I do represent Goldco, and it is monicaprotectswithgold.com. And we do not offer financial advice, but I will say this for my listeners who have transferred, who are of the appropriate age to be able to do so. There are limitations and there are legalities involved with what you can actually transfer from a 401k into metals and or a Roth IRA. Your savings is basically up to you. Most people
I was
diversify
turning to
through
some kind
that
of
one way or the
advertisement.
other. But those folks send me thank you notes for being able to sleep at night. No kidding, because they've been watching
Guessing
their
Wilbert and
retirement
Gates aren't going to
savings
come back on.
diminish up
So I'll go ahead
to
and cut this stream.
30% for
But
some of them
thank you
over
guys
the
for
past
tuning
year,
in.
or over $4
If they do come back
trillion
on, we're going to
in
restart the stream.
losses in retirement portfolios. And for